Welcome to the Great Basin Seasonal Outlook for February through May. Over the last 30 days, we've seen warm temperatures over much of the Great Basin with the exception of eastern Utah, and also well below normal precipitation. We did have a late January storm which brought significant snowfall to both the valleys and the higher terrain of western Nevada and the Sierra, so those areas were pushed to above normal for the time of year, but again, most of the Great Basin, with the exception of a few spots in Idaho and Utah, were well below normal over the last 30 days. Looking at the beginning of the water year, even with that significant storm we did have in late January over the western portion of the Great Basin, that still has kept our water year precipitation below normal with the exception of a small spot in the higher terrain. Otherwise, looking at the entire west, we're seeing well below normal precipitation since the beginning of the water year across much of the Great Basin with the exception of parts of central Idaho, which are near normal. Currently, our snowpack is still below normal, mostly region-wide. The snowfall we had in parts of Nevada did bring parts of northern Nevada and the higher terrain to near normal, and also will remain near normal with snowpack up into parts of central Idaho. Otherwise, we are still seeing below normal snowpack. And conversely, soil moisture has also been well below normal across parts of Utah, which is where our drought conditions are most significant. And also, if you look into California, we are seeing significantly dry soils in northern California as well. Looking at our evaporative demand drought index, we did have some cooler, wetter storms that did move through the Great Basin, so that has brought our evaporative demand drought index to much more improved condition over much of the Great Basin. Still over far southern areas, we still have that more of that short-term drought in areas that did not see much significant precipitation. Looking at our drought monitor, however, looking at our longer term, we are seeing generally the drought is across Utah into southern and eastern Nevada, and we are seeing that exceptional drought in much of those areas. Further west and north, we are seeing extreme to severe drought, and then even into parts of central Idaho, still abnormally dry in some areas. We likely will not see much improvement to the drought despite the storms we just saw. We likely will be returning to a little bit more of a drier regime later in February, so this precipitation really just had more of a temporary impact to the Great Basin, and we are still expecting drought conditions going into the spring and summer. ERC charts across the Great Basin are showing ERCs generally near or below normal across much of the area. And then looking at 10-hour fuel moisture with that colder, wetter storm in late January that moved through, that has improved our fuel moistures, or really in all areas, 10-hour fuel moisture, and then we're seeing those wetter conditions in 100-hour and 1,000-hour as well. Still some drier spots in the far southern areas of the Great Basin. Again, the areas of the Great Basin that have not seen the prolonged precipitation. Currently, we don't have any large fires in the Great Basin and fairly quiet across the country. So now that we have looked at our last 30 days to last few months, we'll look at what we are expecting to happen in the future. So with respect to La Nina and El Nino, currently we are in a state of La Nina, which is the image in the blue here on the left. As you can see, the projections are for warming ocean conditions, probably to a neutral state, but then we are seeing models indicate a little bit more cooling later in the year. So we may see La Nina early in the year, probably more neutral conditions potentially through the fire season, and then a return of La Nina going into the fall. But that remains to be seen, and obviously there are some differences in some of the models. So looking at our shorter term outlook for the next couple weeks going into the middle part of February, still looking at cooler conditions and generally below normal precipitation. So again, as we approach mid-February, we will see that storm track again push a little bit further north, and we will look at a little bit more drier conditions on the southern areas of the Great Basin, but still cooler temperatures at times as these storm systems move through. Looking at the entire month of February, again, cool conditions and drier conditions in the south. The better chance of above normal precipitation will be in the northern and far eastern parts of the Great Basin as the storm track shifts a little bit further north, and we do see some of these colder systems drop into the northern plains. And again, this would generally clip the northern eastern side of the Great Basin. Looking at our 3-month outlook, this is taking us from March through May. Looking at warmer conditions in the south, probably equal chances or near normal conditions in the north, and then the drier weather, which would be a little bit more classic La Nina signature, would be drier in the south and wetter conditions in the Pacific Northwest, and that's likely what we'll start returning to later in the winter and then towards the spring months. So we are looking again for still those drought conditions to continue in the south with not a significant prolonged improvement, and then the moisture be again targeted more in the northern part of the Great Basin. So we put all these pieces together. What we're looking at is generally normal fire conditions expected from February through April, which is generally low fire activity. And then as we get into May, especially if we see that drier pattern return to southern areas and we still have significant drought in place, we'll likely see an earlier start to fire season and also a little bit better potential of higher fire potential over parts of the Arizona Strip and the higher terrain of southern and central Utah, and then also possibly back into the Mount Charleston area. When we get into these very dry patterns where drought has really set in into some of these higher terrain areas, that's where we start to get a little bit more early season impacts from fire potential. So we will be looking for that increase, again, mainly in the higher elevations in the southern part of the Great Basin towards May. That concludes our monthly outlook. Check back next month for the latest updates.